Hey team, we're going to learn how we can generate video thumbnails on the fly and add some cool hover effects with them in Next.js using Cloudinary. I'm Colby Fayok. And if this is your first time here, make sure you click subscribe and click that little notification bell for future web dev content. So starting off, what do I mean by a video thumbnail? If you go to YouTube and see a lot of these graphics, these are actual graphics that people put together, whether it's adding a logo or some text on top, where really I'm just talking about a screen grab, where what we want to do is automatically grab any kind of scene from inside of that video so that we have something to automatically generate for that video. Now, once we have that thumbnail, I want to take it a step up where I really enjoy going to disneyplus.com, where if you hover over some of these category images, you see some really cool background effects where it's going to load an animation that shows just a little bit of personality for the site. So we're going to learn how to automate all of this. And while we're going to do some stuff specifically in React, we're going to use Cloudinary to generate our media, where we're going to both store our videos, but we're also going to use the media API so that we can generate those thumbnails on the fly, as well as any other effects that we want to add to our media. And for an easy way to jumpstart a new React application, we're going to use Next.js, where I created a demo starter, where once we pull this up and spin it up, it's literally just going to give us a grid of videos that are loaded locally so that we can move those over to Cloudinary and we can actually start loading them up and add our capabilities to this. Now, if you want to follow along, you can find the link to this starter right inside of the description of the YouTube video. But if we head down, we can find where we have our yarn create next app command, where I'm going to grab that. I'm going to paste it in my terminal. I'm also going to add some text at the end, which is going to be my project name. So let's call it my video grid, where what that's going to do is it's going to clone down that Next.js project from GitHub. It's going to install all the dependencies, and it's also even going to reset Git history just so I have a good starting place for starting my new application. But once it's done, I can now cd into that directory, where then I can run yarn dev, which is going to load a local development server. So I can now click that and open it up inside a new browser. And in the background, Next.js is going to compile that page. But once it's compiled, we can see exactly what I'm talking about, where we're just going to load a grid of videos. And I'll show you how this is working in the code. If we start to look inside of the source, I'm going to go to my pages, and inside index.js, I'm importing these videos from this data file where I'm going to go through those, I'm mapping through those, I'm just adding the video source for each and every one of them. And particularly if I look inside of the /data videos.json folder, I grabbed a bunch of videos from pexels.com where we can see that I'm attributing the link. We have some IDs for where the files are located, but inside of public/videos is where all those videos are located and where they're loading currently for the application. Now, because we want to use Cloudinary to transform these and give us our capabilities, we need to actually be serving these from Cloudinary. So the first step will be to serve these from Cloudinary. Now, if I head into my Cloudinary account, I want to really put these assets wherever it's going to be easy for me to add them. So what I can do is I can add a new folder called My Videos. And inside of My Videos, we can actually open up this project locally in our file directory. We're inside of that public directory. And if I go to Videos, and I know it's a little small because I'm showing the Finder UI, which I can't make bigger that I'm aware of, but I can take all these videos and simply drag them over into Cloudinary, and they're going to upload them all for me. Now, the only thing that we want to consider is whenever they're uploaded, they also add this random ID at the end of it. So it's going to be the public ID. Now, when you're making sure later when we're using these, you want to make sure you're using the correct IDs for all your videos. But we have all of our media inside of Cloudinary. Let's actually set up our account so we can use it. In order to actually build out our Cloudinary integration, we're going to use the URL Gen SDK. And if I scroll down here, we can see that this is going to be a client-side library that we can use, where if I go to installation, we can see we can add it with either npm or yarn, where I'm going to copy this yarn command and head over, and I'm going to paste it inside of my project. So it's going to install that dependency. But then we can see the usage here while that's installing, where I'm going to first import that Cloudinary instance, and I can take that over to my project. And at the very top of the file, I'm going to first import that in. And if I head back over, we can see that we want to invoke a new instance of Cloudinary with our cloud name. So I'm going to take that snippet as well, and I'm going to paste it into my project right before my home function, where this is going to be the Cloudinary instance that we use. Now, the one thing that we want to add is we want to make sure we update this to our cloud name. Now, in my instance, that's going to be Colby demo, I think. But if I head over to my Cloudinary account again, we can see that right on that dashboard, when you first log in, we have the account details along with that cloud name. So it looks like I didn't have a hyphen in there. I'm going to copy my cloud name, and I'm going to come back and I'm going to update that to not have that. But you want to make sure that you're using your cloud name, not my cloud name. Otherwise, the videos aren't going to work with the references, as well as you'll be subject to my free account limits. And you want to make sure that you have all the glory of your own personal Cloudinary account. But in order to simply set up Cloudinary, that's all we need to do. But next, we want to make sure we have all of our videos configured so that we're actually able to reference them for our Cloudinary account. Now, if I head over to that data videos.json file and I start looking through there, we can see that we have all these IDs where I have my ID of soccer, skateboarding, and as I mentioned a few seconds ago, we have in our actual Cloudinary account random IDs at the end for all of our public IDs. So we need to either do two things. We need to either add those IDs to properly match up inside this file, or we need to head to our media library where inside of that My Videos folder, we want to rename all those public IDs to actually match the ID so that our videos.json file is actually relevant to what our video files are named. So I went through all my videos and I renamed them to have that public ID match what I have inside of my videos.json file. So if I look now, this ID inside of video.json is going to be my public ID. The only thing that's missing is the folder. So for all of these, I'm going to add that folder in front, which is my videos, which may differ depending on where you're storing your videos, if they are in a folder like that or not. But ultimately, this needs to be, the ID needs to be the location of those videos inside of your Cloudinary media library. Now, if I reload the page and try to look, none of these are actually going to work. First of all, it's trying to grab IDs of videos that don't actually exist inside of our project, but also we're not referencing our Cloudinary URLs yet. So let's do that. But now that we know we have all that video data correct inside of our videos JSON file, we can scroll down to where we find our actual video element, and we're going to replace this source with our dynamically generated URL that we're getting from the Cloudinary library. So I'm going to say source is equal to cld.video, and inside of video, we want to pass in our public ID. Now, if you remember, we updated that video.json file so that all the IDs are our public ID. So we're going to simply pass that ID into the video method. And then finally, we want to tag on at the end to URL as a function, which is going to turn that video instance into a URL that will pass to that video. Now I'm going to get rid of that second source, as I was just keeping that there for an example. But now once we reload the page, we can see now all those videos are coming directly from Cloudinary. And we can prove that by going to the network tab, where if I refresh the page and get rid of this search, we can see that with all these media, they're coming directly from cloudinary.com. So now that we actually have our videos loading, our ultimate goal here was to create video thumbnails, right? So now we can do that on the fly with the same APIs. Now on my video element, I'm going to add the poster attribute, which is going to be the thumbnail the native video element can actually use. I'm going to use cld.image and I'm going to pass in that video ID. Even though it's a video, I'm passing that into the image method, but then I'm going to add set asset type, which I'm going to set it to video so that we know that we're generating it from a video. Now, finally, I want to do a couple other things, such as setting the format to auto image, which is going to say that Cloudinary is going to automatically detect what best format to send to the browser for optimization, and specifically it needs to be an image. Otherwise, if you don't specify that it's an image, it might be in some circumstances give you an actual video if you're serving it with, for instance, a public ID that has a file extension at the end. But either way, we want to make sure that we're safe here, and we add auto image. And then finally, we want to add that to URL like we always do so that we have it on our actual poster URL. Now, once I refresh the page, and it might take a second to load for the first time as those are generating, but we can see that when I do refresh the page, we get that little spinner. But if I click the play button, we actually get the start of the video. But when we refresh it, we can see that that still was taken from somewhere inside of the video intelligently. We're looking at the skateboarding one, for instance. It's starting at the beginning, but the actual poster is going to be that shot of the skateboard up on that rail. The ultimate goal here is that that thumbnail is going to show first, so that if that video is still loading in the background, such as if it was a really long video, it's going to show that thumbnail even though the video is still loading. Now, for all intents and purposes, we could probably stop right there, but let's take this to another level where we want to add some more performance attributes to this, such as what if we want to lazy load these videos so that if we don't actually have them in our viewport, we don't want to load the video. Well, we can certainly achieve that by using something like the intersection observer, which you can learn from my tutorial if you click the link above where I talk about how to use React Intersection Observer. But we're instead going to use the React SDK from Cloudinary, which gives us a lot of benefits on top of that, where particularly there's a bunch of plugins that we can use, one being lazy loading, where we get out of the box support of being able to say, we just want to lazy load this, and anytime it loads, it has to be in the viewport first. So to get started, we want to install the Cloudinary React SDK inside of our terminal. So I'm going to run yarn add, and it's going to be at Cloudinary/React, where it's going to add in that dependency for me. Then back inside of my code, underneath my other, I'm going to say import AdvancedVideo from @Cloudinary/React. Now, we only need to make a few different tweaks in order to transform our video into an advanced video. So first of all, we want to obviously use that component. So I'm going to say advanced video for that component name. We're going to leave controls, leave width equals 100%. We're going to change the source to CLD vid, and we're going to remove the to URL at the end of that, as we're passing in an instance of that video to the advanced video, which already knows how to control and take advantage of that CLD video instance. Now, if we reload the page, everything should still look just like it did before. We're not adding any additional capabilities, but now let's add that plugin for lazy loading. At the top inside of my import statement for React, I'm going to import lazy load, go back down to my advanced video component. I'm going to add a new property called plugins. I'm going to set that to an array, and I'm going to pass in lazy load and invoke it as a function. So it's going to be an invoked function passed into an array into my plugins prop. And if you had a good eye, I spelled that wrong and I put load lazy instead of lazy load. So after I have that fixed, and if we open up our browser, we can see that nothing really looks different this time, but I'm going to open up my network tab and I'm going to actually shrink the browser so that we can see what's happening, where I'm only seeing 2 videos here right now, right? So if I refresh the page, I only want to be loading those 2 videos, which is exactly what's happening because we're now using that lazy load plugin. But if I start to scroll down, as those videos come into the viewport, they're actually going to be loaded, which is a good thing, but that means that by default, if I don't see the videos, they're not going to load, which is not going to waste precious resources. Now we have our videos in here and we're loading them performantly, but one of the things that I wanted to do was add some of that Disney Plus magic, right? Where I want to make it so that I'm only showing the thumbnails, and if I hover over them, it's going to show a preview of that video. So to do this, we're going to kind of rethink how we're actually displaying this UI, where right now we're showing the entire video, where the goal here is somebody would come in and click it, where we're going to show just a preview of it, where maybe somebody will click through to an actual landing page for that video. Now, we're not going to go too deep into the weeds for that, but we're just going to change how we're actually thinking about what this is going to look like. So that means the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add a new image here where I'm going to load that poster separately, and then I'm going to use CSS to hide and show each of those. So I can say, if I'm not hovering over it, I'm just going to show that image up there. But if I am hovering, I'm going to put the video on top, which is going to be what's going to be shown. So fun thing is, since we are already importing our React SDK here, we can also use the advanced image SDK as part of this. So I'm going to go down, and instead of using the image, I'm going to do the exact same thing that I'm doing with the video, but this time I'm going to use the advanced image SDK, where I'm going to grab that poster value. We're going to grab all of that. We're going to get rid of the poster on the video since it's redundant at that point. But just like we did CLD video, we're going to do CLD image, where I'm going to set that equal to that image instance. I'm going to close my tag. And now if we look in the browser, we can see that we have double for each of these, where we have our thumbnail that's being automatically generated, but we also have that video, which is the source material. Now, in order to make this work, again, we're going to use CSS. And in particular, this starter comes with Sass, so I'm going to use Sass, but you could certainly use just regular CSS. But I'm going to add a class name of styles.video to this parent element so that we can control the UI from that parent relatively. Now, in order to add the CSS, I'm going to open up my home.module.scss file and paste some CSS at the bottom, which I'll walk through. I'm just pasting it to make it a little bit easier to walk through. But we have this video class, which is what we just added to that list item here, where inside we're saying we want to set that as a position to relative because we want our image and our video to be able to relatively position itself according to that parent element. So first off, we're saying our image, we're going to make that relative only so that we can set a z-index, where we're going to set that as a fixed z-index of 1. This is just creating the layer as to where it exists inside of that parent element. Then we're going to take our video and we're going to say that we want to absolutely position this so that it can shift up basically on top or behind of that original image element. So it's going to be placed in the exact same location, but then we can control it with the z-indexing in order to determine how it's being shown inside the UI. We're also adding an opacity of 0 just to make sure that it's not shown, and that z-index of 0 so that it is below that image. But then we can see finally when we do trigger that hover, it's going to take that video, it's going to raise it up to a z-index of 2, placing it above the image with that opacity of 1. So now back inside of my app, if I hover over any of these, we can see that I show the thumbnail at first, but as soon as I hover, I can see that video in the player UI. Now, we want to take this a step further, right? We want to autoplay that video, and we probably don't want these controls, as our intent isn't to have somebody control it from this UI. So back to our advanced video, the first thing we're going to do is get rid of controls, but we're going to replace that with autoplay. And we're also going to replace it with a loop, because what we want to do is we want it to autoplay so that it's automatically going to play at all times. And then we want to make sure it goes over and over and over so that it doesn't just stop and become a still image, just like the image itself. Now, if I look back in the browser and hover over, we can see that when I hover over, it is playing that video, which is giving that pretty cool effect. Now again, we could probably just stop right here and call it a day, but we probably don't want to have it playing over and over and over in the background. That's probably just using precious resources in some capacity that we don't need to be happening. And on top of that, one thing that I would prefer is that if I hover off something and hover back on it, that it stops and starts based off of that previous position, where right now, if I hover off of it, it's going to just keep playing in the background and it's going to lose that position, losing some of the effect if I'm doing something very specific and intricate for that background in the animation or background video. Now, before we do that, one thing I do want to mention, you also need to add the muted attribute to this if we are going to autoplay. Now, we're going to remove autoplay now, but if you want to have something autoplayed, you need to make sure you mute it. Otherwise, it won't actually autoplay in some instances unless you have an interaction, which is a security or / privacy thing that's baked into the browsers to make sure that advertisers aren't just blaring out videos right away. But spoilers, we're going to get rid of that autoplay like I just said, where instead we're going to control this video manually based off of somebody actually interacting with it from a React perspective. And to do that, we're going to use refs, which is a way to attach ourselves to the component instance and then inside to the video, the actual HTML video, so we can use browser APIs to interact with it. Now to start, we're going to head to the top of the file and we want to make sure we import use ref from React. And if I head back down to where I'm creating these videos, I'm going to create a new player ref and I'm going to set that equal to use ref, because we're ultimately going to take this player ref and we're going to pass it in as a ref property to our advanced video. Now I'm using a player ref as we're going to eventually have an instance of that advanced video where we want to grab the video instance inside of that, which we'll see in a second. Now, in order to control this, we can look at our LI where we're going to add on mouse over as a function and on mouse out so that we can control our player based off of those actual functions happening. So I'm going to create those functions as well, on mouse over. I'm going to actually say function, not functions or whatever I was saying, and then function on mouse out, where I'm going to pass these in to my props so that I can control the hover, but then inside that's going to be able to have access to our player ref. Now for start, let's just console log that out to see what's actually happening inside. If I hover over one of those thumbnails, we can see that I'm getting that player ref. And if I start to inspect inside, we can see at the top, I do have that advanced video. Now that's great if I want to have access to some of the APIs for the Cloudinary SDK, but I want to access the video itself. So I'm going to go down even deeper to the video ref of that and get the current value of that, which is going to be that actual video element, which I can then control. So inside of my on mouse over, I'm going to say player ref.current.video ref current, and I'm going to say play, because I'm going to say anytime I mouse over, I want to play that video. And then on the mouse out, I'm going to do the same exact thing, except I'm going to say pause, so that anytime those functions run, when I hover over and then hover out, it's going to play and pause accordingly. Now, one thing I was wrong about, it looks like the autoplay or using the play actually extends beyond just the autoplay capability. And that also applies to if you're trying to programmatically hit play, which makes a lot of sense, right? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we do remain muted for our element so that we can get by that. We're not going to be playing music as part of this anyways, but that way we can have the video playing in the background programmatically. So on our advanced video element, we want to make sure that we have muted on there. And now when I hover over, we can see that video starts to play. If I hover off and wait a few seconds, we can see that it picked up exactly where it left off before. And we can probably see that more closely with this hang glider, where if I see, it looks like he's about off, wait a few seconds, he's still right off that cliff, right? So we're getting that effect where we're able to finish that full preview. We don't have it just continuously playing in the background. So we're able to capture the entire intent of that video or that animation that we have when we have that effect. Now, taking this one step further, we can notice that when we have these videos in the background, some of them are a lot longer than others. Like the stir fry cooking one is like 26 seconds. Now, we probably don't need to load that entire video in the background if all we want to do is show a nice little cool preview effect, right? With Cloudinary and the transformations, we can actually generate a preview on the fly as well, where it's going to, in the background, once we hit it for the first time, it's going to process out a preview determined by how long we actually make it of that video, which it can then play instead as we're trying to deliver this. So at the end of our cld.video where we have this, I'm going to add effect, and I'm going to say preview, where I'm also going to add a colon, where I'm going to say I want the duration to be 4 seconds. If I load the page, we might get some spotty loading on this because it's actually happening in the fly. Now, it seems like because I probably processed this before, but you might get some 423 errors, which means it's processing in the background. Now, once that first processing takes place, it's not going to reprocess again. It's going to be served cache. But we can see here that exactly with this cooking stir fry, that because we define this as a preview, and specifically a preview with a duration of 4 seconds, we get this intelligently created preview of this video that's only that 4 seconds long rather than that entire video. And again, it's doing that intelligently. It's not just taking the first 4 seconds, which wasn't what we're seeing here. It's taking 4 seconds intelligently of that video to give something interesting to show as a preview. Now, I could probably spend all day here trying to add additional things such as automatic optimization. And we can even dynamically crop these videos using intelligent AI to determine where the focus is for the gravity of it so that these are all formatted in the same size. But I think we can probably stop there as we're already doing some cool things with the hover and automatic generations of these assets. The cool thing about using the Cloudinary tech to manage your assets is you gain this huge range of capabilities on top of that media. So on top of just simply delivering it from a performance CDN, we can transform it to whatever our use case is for our application. What's your favorite Cloudinary transformation use case, whether it's for images or videos? Videos are pretty cool, but I know a lot of use cases formulate around images. If you want to learn more some of the cool things that you can do with Cloudinary, check out my video Webcam Photo Filters and Effect in React with Cloudinary, where I teach you how to add a Darth Vader mask to an image from your webcam. Or if you want to learn more about some other techniques that you can use for using interactions inside of a React app, check out my video Detecting Long Press Gestures with JavaScript Events in React, plus a custom React hook. If you like this video, make sure you hit thumbs up, subscribe, and click that little notification bell for future web dev content. Thanks for watching.